do you think kids should start learning about sex education in schools?
Around puberty.
10.
Around 12.
Maybe a little bit younger than 12 years old, probably at about 10.
About 10 or 11.
Well, today on Context, in a sex-saturated society, are we sexually satisfied? I want to know, are traditional Christian views too limiting? I'll talk to a sex educator who wrote a how-to book for teens on losing their virginity. I'm Lorna Dueck, and you're watching Context, the show that looks at life beyond the headlines. Sex isn't just in the bedroom anymore. Kids are learning about sex and all kinds of it from the media, their parents, friends, and sex ed classes at school. But what exactly are they learning, and how much do they really need to know? And for each of us, as life changes, how can we experience the true sexual intimacy we were created for? Sex, God, and sex education. Let's put it in context. It's time to talk and have an uncomfortable conversation about what are they learning, what are they being exposed to. So our first guest is Kim Martin, who's written a manual for young people on how to have sex for the first time. Kim, why was a manual like that necessary for public schools? And it's a public library book, so it's way out there.
It's for anyone who can buy it or get it from the library, yes. It's called All the Way Sex for the First Time. And really, it's also about not having sex. It's a lot of the book is trying to not lecture young people, because anyone who works or lives with young people knows that lecturing does not go very far. So it's asking a series of questions to see if, for them, when they reflect, if they feel like they're actually ready.
And in the entire book, you leave out my favorite word when it comes to young people and sex, my kids and sex, abstinence.
Yes, I do.
It's not in the entire book.
No, it hardly ever comes out of my mouth.
Why?
I prefer to say waiting until you're ready. Abstinence means many, many things. It means not drinking. Does it mean not kissing? Does it mean not French kissing? Does it mean not touching under your clothes? Does it mean not touching someone's genitals? So it means many things to many people. So I prefer to be very clear about waiting to have sexual intercourse till you're ready.
Okay, so till you're ready has two different definitions has many different definitions.
Yes, it does.
And so I guess what I want to know is, as a parent, I'm struggling to stay in the game of being relevant to my kids and setting high standards, okay? Yes. I would say, you're not going to have any sex until you're married. And behind your back, they're sneaking off to do whatever. How do you manage that balance?
I think to say it without giving a reason why is not very helpful. And so if you're going to share your values and say, this is what I hope for you, and this is why I hope you'll do this, rather than just because I said, or just because the Bible said, or just because a minister or your teacher says. That doesn't usually wash with teens. So given that, we know that by talking, sharing information, there's this myth that somehow that will encourage people to run out and have sex. That's a little bit like saying, if we talk about cigarettes and what's in tobacco and smoking, they're going to run out and smoke.
So it's not a one-time conversation here. I'm sitting you down, and this is what the birds and bees are all about, and why you're not going there.
Yeah, if you try it, if you wait, it's too late, because our kids are way, way ahead of us all the time.
Okay.
So.
All right, we do have an audience feedback because there's been lots of interest in this topic. Okay, let's just take a listen here. Okay, we've got a comment. Okay.
I grew up in a very sexual-friendly household, and I was just wondering what you think some of the things that prevent families from having a continual dialogue and an open, friendly discussion about sexuality.
I think parents worry that somehow if they raise this, again, it's like a thumbs up, you know, consent to go out and have sex at a young age. And we know from small studies, from vast international studies, that it is absolutely the opposite. That the more informed you help young people become, right from the time they can talk, before they can talk, all the way up, that they're going to make better decisions for themselves. It's also culture and religion that play into that with families.
I do want to ask about putting culture and religion into the education process, because whether you talk about it in a family, like that question just raised, it is being talked about at school. And I want to just race you through the country. Okay, so in Ontario, it's back to the drawing board after intense protests by parents saying it's way too far. They had to retract the curriculum reforms that would have taught that. In Alberta, parents had to be notified whenever there was explicit sexual discussion of either sex or religion. Both were viewed as equally controversial. New Brunswick, their parents faced a firestorm because they were discussing masturbation, orgasm, anal sex grades 6 to 8. So that was changed to add more abstinence. BC, 14 school districts have integrated the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer issues across the curriculum. There you're having Christian parents complaining about reverse discrimination, saying, what about my values into the curriculum? Should the religious values of people's homes be part of the curriculum? Should schools say, in this kind of religious tradition, they believe this about sexuality?
Absolutely not. That's parents and educators are partners in this. All educators understand that, and I hope all parents understand that. Because parents really are kids' primary sex educators.
So do you think sex education is morally neutral then?
Oh, absolutely not. There's a set of core, what we believe, and I believe are core universal values. So respect for other people, telling the truth, those kinds of core values. So I wouldn't say that's morally neutral, but it's neutral in terms of religious values.
All right,
for
so
sure.
We've got a school teacher in the audience. What has it been like to be a school teacher in that climate?
Well, it's been challenging, particularly as a person of faith. So it's just interesting the comments that were just made, because I think in terms of at least the Toronto Public School Board's policy, and the intent is that we respect all views and beliefs, no matter what the issue, including sex education in this case. But I've found that at different times, depending on the individuals of colleagues or administrators, that it can vary in terms of respecting whether it's a cultural belief or a religious belief. And I think part of my question and wondering is, how do you open up dialogue and say, hey, wait a second, this is what we're trying to do as a whole public education system, and it's not happening. And I guess my other thought was, in connection to that you get sometimes labeled or misinterpreted as, you know, putting down another group or an issue, not being open-minded. So I kind of tossed it as a question and a comment together.
So what's the answer there, Kim? So
I think definitely, because educators are human, they're going to have biases against certain groups. And if you're sensing that from an administration or from other colleagues, that needs to be named, that needs to be challenged, just as any kind of bias or prejudice against any group. It's absolutely not to be tolerated. And so to be a champion of that is difficult.
So the dialogue about education, stay in the game. If your values are different than what you've been seeing, just stay in the game and keep being part of the public system. People might be surprised about this, but you actually went public with this in an article in the Globe and Mail. That
I can't believe you dug that up.
Well, you know, it's the Google searches sell all kinds of interesting things. So when it was time for your daughter to knock on your door and say, oh, by the way, Mom, I'm sleeping over at my boyfriend's, you said, no bloody way.
She phoned me from his place, actually.
And so why was that so important that she not get that permission from you?
Because I, as her parent, felt like she was in no way ready for that. I didn't know him. I didn't know his family situation. So not only did it feel inappropriate, it just didn't even feel that safe in that context. And I don't mean physically, really, but emotionally and so forth.
Well, and we didn't talk about the incredible change that there's actually been in disease rates like chlamydia, because as we've gone into this very casual sex, there's been a more than doubling of that sexually transmitted disease in the last 10 years.
Yes, chlamydia is
and the kids just need to know that you're playing a Russian roulette with your health as well.
They do. They absolutely need to know it's like fire. Right? It's a fantastic, amazing, awesome, powerful thing, and it can burn you like that.
All right.
They need to know that.
Kim, thank you very much, Kim Martin. Now it's time to find out what you think. Should parents have the right to withdraw children from sex ed classes in public schools? Give us your view on that, and you can also write to us at Facebook and Twitter with that opinion. Be part of this colorful conversation. We'd like to know what you think. And we'll have the studio audience's poll results in a few moments. So stay tuned. I'll talk with a sex therapist and marriage counselor about what makes for great sex. And the answer might surprise you.
A prolonged illness confined the little girl to her bed. Sometimes it's hard for me to sleep, she said. So I pick stars and name them after all the things I thank God for. Mom, Dad, Jesse.
The warm, personal stories of our daily bread can shape your perspective on life with the wisdom of the Bible. You can receive our daily bread at no cost or obligation. Visit quietmoments.org or call 800-863-5392 now, and we'll deliver our daily bread right to your home.
You know what, she asked? I don't think there are enough stars for all the thank yous.
In just a few moments each day, our Daily Bread's engaging stories can help you see your world in a whole new way. Call 800-863-5392 now for our Daily Bread.
Well, before the break, I asked the question, should parents have the right to withdraw their children from sex ed classes in public schools? And here's how the audience voted. Well, today on Context, we are talking about sex, God, and sex education. And now we're going to learn with Marian Gertz, who is a licensed sex therapist and marriage and family counselor. She has provided relationship and sex advice in private practice and in the media. And Marian, we're just so glad you can be here to help us sort this hot issue out. Okay, so what are the consequences of going early and casual with sex for teenagers?
Well, there's a whole definition of early. And we have talked about the fact that when somebody is ready, they may be physically ready, but are they really emotionally ready? And I think that that's really what it comes down to. And it's fairly recent that science would even look at this. We even ask the questions. So what are we seeing? We are seeing that there's enough education or information out there that crisis pregnancies or early pregnancies are down. The rate of those are down. But in fact, the prevalence of STDs is running rampant.
Yeah, it's more than doubled. Okay, we've got a studio audience comment from one of the teens here who was listening in on sex education. And Krista, you want to weigh in on your sex education experience at school?
All they really say is, like, just make sure you use protection. And to me, I don't really feel that's right, because it's a lot more to it than just the few minutes of fun or whatever you want to call it. To me, it's not just good enough for just make sure you use protection if you're going to, because everyone just assumes you're going to be doing that, and I don't feel that's right.
Okay, Marian, what do teens need to know about early sexual behavior?
I think that all people need to have some really basic information about sex. And even as sex is selling tires and toothpaste, it's also selling us a bill of goods. We are being told about two-dimensional sexuality, which talks about experience, which talks about technique, which talks about emotions, but not in the context of a committed long-term relationship. And we want to look at what makes really good sex. What does good sex look like, and what does it make? What makes good sex?
Okay, we promised we would answer that question. What does make really great sex?
Human beings have some primal needs, and that goes way beyond food, clothing, shelter, and water. We need to be meaningfully connected, accepted, and loved. Meaningful connection says that you're significant to somebody. If you were lost, somebody would come looking for you. So that's connection. Acceptance says no perfection this side of heaven, but who you are is precious just because you breathe. So there's acceptance. The third, love, talks about positive regard. It talks about affection. It can also be sex. So that combination, that full meal, is how I like to look at it. It's not just the drive-through where you get some physical energy or some satisfaction sexually, but it's more of a sense of long-term commitment. What makes good sex? Science would tell us that it has to do with long-term committed relationship. It has to do with a faith perspective, that people will share.
You know, in researching this material, I was surprised to see the Canadian statistics that casual sex is pretty normal for at least 50% of our college and university age kids. And by casual sex, like as I'm looking up this material, I'm seeing the phrase, do the walk of shame and just go before breakfast. Like, do the walk of shame. How does that affect then who you are for the next relationship?
Well, I think it comes down to one of the saddest things, but yet one of the most impactful components of working with an individual or with a couple where we're talking about healthy human sexuality was the introduction of shame. Now, that goes way back, as we know, coming from our faith tradition, but the idea that somehow it's not about who you are as a person who has worth and value and merit in your own being, but it's something to do with performance. It's something to do with packaging. It's something to do with needing to measure up. And I think therein comes the shame, because can we really measure up? Some of the images that we have in terms of our media,
yeah, the ones that...
it's not sustainable. It's not real. It can be shame-inducing.
Coming up, a pastor popular among young adults clears away the confusion about sex and God. We'll be back with that.
What should kids be learning in the classroom?
Teach them more about relationships to start with, I think. The more they know about the basics, probably the better.
Please welcome from the Meeting House, Bruxy Cavey, a parent and a pastor. What is your advice on this issue about sex?
I want to say, as a parent and a pastor, sex should be a fundamental aspect of who we are. It's how God made us. Sex, everyone has a sex life. Whether you're male or female, you have, your gender is part of your sex life. It's not just something you do. You are living embodied as a sexual being. And so I think that part of raising children is integrating appropriately, at appropriate stages, by those who know them most intimately, conversations about their sexuality that just start with what it means to be a boy or girl, what it means to have those feelings, so that we never have the talk. I think as a parent, if you have to have the talk, you've failed. Because we don't do that with any other topic, do we?
We just talk about it, whatever, all the time.
We don't say, now I'm going to tell you there's such a thing as math. I've kept this from you until, you know, or now I'm going to say, this is what driving a car is like, all in one day. Or there's no other topic on the planet that we talk about having the talk about, and certainly not this one that is so indigenous to who we are as a human being.
Okay, and you talk about this natural thing, and we mentioned last time that the casual sex thing has got a phrase, the walk of shame that they do out in the morning, and someone in the studio audience wants to comment about that word shame being associated with casual sex. Let's just go to our studio audience there. You had a comment about this.
I do, and I was hoping actually that you could speak to it as well. When we look at shame, I think of things that we can't talk about and things that we don't have the opportunity to share about. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, if we could talk about sexuality, could we remove some of the shame that goes along with acts, or not just acts, but parts of who we are?
Yeah. Well said, and yes, I think you're putting your finger on something that's very core. Now, as a pastor, I'll say this to fellow Christians who are out there. We should be leading the way in talking about this part of our humanity that we claim God designed. You know, we claim to follow a God who invented sex.
Yes.
Sex is his idea. So we should be people who say...
we were trying to go there with this program,
well, exactly.
But it was
Thank you, that's right. High five.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, good. And this is what's fascinating is that Christians, now this is historically, I hope things are changing, but decades ago, Christians would be the first to protest that sex would be taught in schools. But statistically, Christian parents would be the least likely to teach it at home. Publicly, they would say, you shouldn't talk about it at school, you should talk about it at home. We want to educate our own children, but they never would.
You've done a whole couple of series teaching on this stuff, and we'll put those web links up.
I preach about sex all the time.
I know, but you say the Bible has good news and bad news about sex.
Sure.
Spell it out.
Well, first of all, the good news is it's God's idea, it's who we are. I mean, I love, whether you grow up to have sex or not, being a boy or being a girl is an amazing privilege. Being male and being female reflects something of who God is. The Bible says when he created us, male and female, he made us, male and female, in his image.
Okay, so that's the good news.
That's the
sex
good news.
Sex is God's thing, it's good.
When you have something powerful, something beautiful, and then you misuse it, or someone misuses it against you, It can leave very deep wounds. Talking about this more and being very clear on what I would say as a Christian, what God's guidelines are going to help prevent pain, but when there is pain, are going to help bring restoration.
Okay, you are the expert on recovering from pain. When this happened in your life, because sex can be repaired when it's been broken.
It can. I've gone through some, I've hit the bottom as far as being wounded by sexuality through someone else's actions that left me very broken and very dark. I couldn't see the light around me. I'll tell you, what God used in my life was both himself directly, but his people. I mean, God is infinitely relational. Sex is part of that. And so God heals us through those who come around us who teach us how to trust again.
Okay, so the deep wound that God is trying to protect by saying only do marriage or only do sex under the permanence of marriage, why would he make the bar so high when your body wants to do it like way, way earlier before then?
Yeah. It seems to me that although over the recent decades, we've learned how to prevent pregnancy through birth control. If we take that out of the picture for a moment, you do understand that, that sex is that action that leads to babies. Now, often we say sex is making love. I'm not a fan of that term. I don't think sex makes love. I think sex makes babies. I think sex might express love if love is there, but it's also going to express pain or hurt or dominance or superiority or insecurity. So sex and love are meant to go together, but they don't always. What God is saying is the most creative thing that you can accomplish as a human being, really, which is not just making a work of art, it's making another human being. That's God-like, made in the image of God. We can make other human beings. That most creative potential of being a human, he wants that to happen within the context of a loving, committed relationship, because that's the highest quality of relationship that we can achieve as humans. And just biologically, if God didn't call us into permanence that way, if we were living more akin to the animal kingdom, that would be a bad rap for the babies and the children. Women would raise the kids, guys would have a harem. Right? Guys wouldn't stick around. And God is protecting women and children, especially by saying, if I'm engaged in the act of baby making, I'm engaged in the act of commitment making. I need to be here to be ready to be a parent.
I want to go to a youth pastor in our audience who actually taught a whole series with kids on abstain. Andrew, why was that important to you to do, and how did it go over?
I think just because, as we've talked about in society, our society is so sex-saturated, and they're getting these messages on TV and songs and internet, and like we had our first guest, in the schools. And so I think we really need to present the alternative view that the possibility of waiting for sex until you were married is realistic. And so even as the first guest said, it's a discussion, and this is my hope for you. When I teach it, I say, this is my hope for you, based on what God's hope for you is. And so we give kids the opportunity to think, hey, is this something that's possible? Because oftentimes it's just the assumption is made, it's impossible, it's unrealistic. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not impossible, it's not unrealistic. This is something that God can empower you to be able to do.
All right, okay, let's find another audience comment on that.
I just wanted to comment again, specifically in response to your comment. I think the conversation around waiting to have sex is very important. And as a sexual health educator, I know that people who do sexual health education responsibly are very committed to showing all sides. And so my argument or my response to your concern would be that sexual health education done in the schools should have all of that information. So whether someone wants to wait or whether they want to engage in sexual behavior, both of those conversations are very important so they can make a choice that's supported by information rather than by fear.
More after this. Every journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But what comes after that first step is taken? The faith journey is a movement, a lifestyle, filled with lots of questions.
It's about this belief in new life and new creation.
In his book, Mile One, author Paul Carter accompanies readers along the first mile of their faith journey. His practical ideas like connecting in tribe, understanding the Bible, learning to pray, and developing self-control and more will help you and others you know grow in faith.
Your mind is open as you share stories, ideas, and experiences with one another.
If you have unanswered questions about walking with God or want to grow in your faith, then I'd recommend this resource tool to you.
Mile 1 is the perfect companion for further exploration of the faith issues talked about on Listen Up TV.
Are you or someone you know new to the journey of faith? Mile 1 makes a great personal read. It's also helpful for group discussion. To order your copy of Mile 1 for just $17.99, call 1-866-315-2080. Beyond the first step and into the journey of following Jesus. All right, well, it's a busy day with the studio audience on this topic of sex, God, and sex education. We've got a comment from Andrew here at the side.
Just in response to you, I guess when I look at it, I see a difference between a secular approach to abstinence and a faith-based one. And I understand that there is a secular approach to that. I guess from my perspective, the faith-based approach is going to come at it from a different angle. And for me, that's an important aspect of being able to share it with kids from that idea. And it's kind of unfortunate, I think, in the secular school system that wants to be, inclusive of all these ideas, that we would never give kids the opportunity to hear a faith-based approach to abstinence, which for some kids might be helpful, for others not, but just that we would not allow them to have that perspective. I think that's kind of sad.
Okay, so bottom line, what does sex and the idea of putting it in a trusted, committed relationship, marriage, what does that reveal about God's character?
Specifically, sex itself is designed and revealed in Scripture as a living embodiment of how intimate God wants to be with us. There's something about our sexuality and the intimacy of intercourse that reveals the intimacy that the husband wants to have with his bride. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it is the husband who enters the female, who leaves his seed behind, and the result is new life within the bride. That the analogy of marriage and sex within marriage becomes this kind of living, embodied epistle of God's desire for intimacy with us, and to see new life be the result of that. Sex is a beautiful thing.
I'm sure somebody's watching saying, that was way too much information for me.
Well, God wasn't.
All right, Brooks and KV, thank you very much. Pastor of the Meeting House, I love your church and the way you guys teach, and thank you for just trying to help us figure it all out. And for your chance to get a free book from us, we need your feedback on today's show, and I'm sure we're going to get lots of it, so we'll take a random sample of it. Send us an email or leave us a message on our video line, and you can also drop in at Facebook and Twitter at Context. I'm Lorna Dueck. For all of us at Context, thanks for watching.